This is another tip on a Spyder. You want to get one of these transverse engine mounts, or excuse me, engine hoist. And it's really not a hoist. All you're doing is supporting the engine. And in this, they often have a transverse bar here, but you don't need it. And the more room you leave for yourself, the better. But this is all you need to support the engine. You're going to take off the 3 other mounts. And having a lift underneath the car is going to get in your way. So this way you just lift the car a little bit, support the engine, put a little load on it if you need to, and then you can remove your 3 mounts. And you're going to want to remove this mount, particularly on a C60 with a 6-speed. This is going to be in the way. So the mount that goes on the transmission, after you drop the other 2, don't mind the blood on the hand, that was another issue. After you drop this down, you can get the 3 14mm off the top of the mount and take that off. And then that way it's not in your way and you'll drop out, otherwise it's gonna hang up. The cables, or actually the connectors, you can try to get them that hold the shift cables, but again, I find it easier to drop the transmission down and then muck with those, because there's just very little room unless you want to drain the coolant and everything. It's easier to get those cables after you drop it. Here's another setup that I found very helpful. Always using shop lights, etc. You're kidding yourself. I mean, it's nice to have a headlight for your head, an LED. Those have come down quite a bit. But I'm saying for general lighting, you can never have too much lighting in a car in a garage. So just get yourself a shop light. These are like $20 or $25 from Harbor Freight. And then you can just put a couple, it comes with a chain, secure it where it doesn't fall off. Then no, this is not from my hanger, this rust, that's from something else. But these are just, I just use, these are plastic, I think for wire shelving. But anyway, they work good. You can just hang them anywhere. You could use magnets or something else, but I use those. And again, it did not scratch the paint. It won't hurt the paint. And then you can just hang it on there and support your light. You can move it out of the way when you're done. But these are LED. They're not going to break. They're not glass. They're like $20 to $25, and it will flood the engine compartment with light, and it'll blow away any shop light or headlight that you use, and you'll be very thankful. And again, this is the only thing holding the engine up now is this one rod. No chains, anything else needed. But you can also, with these transverse bars, you can run tie straps, ratchet straps, and support the engine. It makes it a lot easier to pull the transmission up rather than trying to balance it on a jack. Is lift it using straps coming off the top and lifting it up rather than trying to support it from the bottom. You want to keep as much stuff off the floor as possible, as you have very limited room anyway. And you want as much stuff out of your way. This thing can come out of the way. I can move it on either side, but honestly right now it's out of my way. This is just showing the light. And again, I hope you can see how bright a LED shop light for $20 to $25 is under a car, how uniform that light is. You don't get any shadows. You'll thank me for it 100 times. I wish I did it before. I had portable shop lights. You're always dropping them, knocking them, they're in your way. This is the way to go. You want to get a shop light. And again, anytime you're doing car work, just hang it over the hood, or in the Spyder's case, the frunk, and it makes it much, much easier. And they're cheap. They're, again, 20 to 25 bucks. You'll thank me later. And again, these are usually free at Harbor Freight, or a couple bucks or whatever, but they usually give giveaways on these things. They're great to have. Just put small fasteners in there as you go. As often as you can, put the fastener right back in where you took it out so you don't mix them up. Toyota uses a lot of bolts that'll fit in a lot of different places, so they're easy to mix up. But these things are great for small parts. And then I just put a silly little plastic bag underneath so you don't mar up your paint. But it works. These are your friend. These are 3/8 inch drive, six point. Sorry for the focus, but you want a set of swivel sockets. They're not that expensive, and you'll thank me later. They're a lifesaver. You can still break nuts with them. Again, if it's really strong, you want an impact, etc. But for 95% of the nuts you want, the only downside, they're a little larger, so someplace you won't be able to get them in. But I'm telling you, these things will save your life. Here's the other thing you want: ratchets, like gear wrench. Not just regular ratchets, ratcheting ratchets. You'll use them over and over and over. These are only like $25 to $30 for a set. Sometimes you'll see them on sale for $20 for good ones. These are like 72 teeth, so you don't have to rotate them very much. Tractor Supply sells them regularly for, I think, $29 for a set of 8. 10 millimeter all the way up to 18 millimeter. And they only skip a couple sizes, which aren't used on the MR2 or Toyotas anyway. So you want a set of these. This is your go-to tool, as is this and one other I'll show in a second. Sorry, compressor kicked on. But again, you just use lathe screws and just a permanent marker, secure them to a board, so they're very handy to where you're located, and they give you a lot of leverage. And again, these things are cheap. They're just magnetic bars, Harbor Freight, so it's useful for kind of strange tools that you need to have handy. Strap wrenches, seal pullers, long needle nose pliers, your persuader bars, and then this is also a very useful tool, just an extension with a magnet on the end. Not that you ever drop anything, but I've been known to do it, so it's helpful to recover nuts, tools, etc. that fall down at the places they were never designed to be on a car. Sliced bread is great. This is in the same category. 3/8, pretty heavy duty. This one's the fuel brushless. You'll pay probably close to a couple $100, but you'll use this over and over and over. Get with the 3/8, you can always get a 1/2 inch later if you want. But the advantage of these also, you can break nuts loose with it. It's not like an air where you need air to be able to break it. You can break it by hand and then follow up by just pushing the button to reverse the rest of it away. And it's pretty slim. They've come with 2 batteries, and you'll be able to run all day with it. Last tool, just got this. Not quite sliced bread, but close. So there's many different brands. Get a decent one. This will run maybe 5 to 6 hours on rechargeable. Anytime you're taking a break, you can recharge it. The band's washable. It's just a recharge light. The only thing I don't like about it, if you bump your head on the back or laying down and hit the switch, you could shut it off. But this swivels, but it floods it with light. And as you get older like me, you can't have too much light when you're working on a car. That way the light's always there where you're looking. They're great. Thanks. Sorry for the focus. Here's another tip. This is from Mary Frankster, and it's a lifesaver. Make yourself a couple studs for these top bolts. And sorry about the focus. But all it is get the right size thread. I think it's M12 or M14 by 1 1/4. You can match it up with your old bolts. And before you drop the transmission, take those out, the existing bolts, and then make yourself a stud. And all it is, you just cut the head off. You probably have leaves laying around somewhere. Cut the head off, and then you can put a little bit of either a screw end or something in here so you can screw it in and out by hand. And then that way, take the top ones out. You can screw these, replace them with these studs. And it's nice to have the smooth threads here. That way you can hang the transmission on here as you pry it off the bottom, and it won't put a load on your center bearing or clutch. And it makes it much safer to pull the transmission off. And that way you get all the rest of the bolts, it's hanging on these, pry it off, and the whole thing will snap off. And then, excuse me, not snap off, hang on to these studs. And then once it's out, you can pull them out or leave them there for when you put the transmission back on. They really help lining it up. There's a couple small dowels way down here. You can see one at the bottom, maybe. Sorry for the great camera work. But those are way too short to help you guide the transmission on. This gives you a lot of alignment, and then you can jostle it back and forth and get your splined plate to align in the clutch, and then just slide the whole transmission on, secure it with a bolt or two, and then you can slide these off again. So these are lifesavers. It won't cost you anything. And then you have it for the next time. Just keep them right where you do your transmission stuff. Okay, I put this tip on the MR2 Group Spyder page. This is a C60 already converted for rear wheel drive. But on your front wheel drive, this shaft is gonna be, actually the linkage is gonna be on the other side of the car over here. This bolt has to come out. And this is often rusted, etc. This one has been cleaned up once or twice. If you look, it's got a crack in the case, but I don't think it's through. But anyway, this one's getting replaced. But this bolt will drive you nuts, particularly on one that's a 20 to 25-year-old plus transmission. So you take this nut off, but this is a tapered solid steel pin, and it often freezes inside here. And you don't want to be beating on this hard without supporting on the other side, because you're putting all that load. This is just aluminum course, and there's only a couple brass bushings on either end. This is your friend. It's called a pneumatic palm nailer. You can probably get one at Harbor Freight for $20 to $25. And it's got a driver in the end designed to hold a nail. And again, this is very useful to have around the house if you ever to drive nails anyway. So once you get that nut out, you can get this linkage out of your way, hook this to compressed air, put this, it's hard to show, I apologize. This little driving pin, don't do this when it's hooked up, obviously, but you see that goes in and out very quickly. Thousands of pounds of force by compressed air. It's literally a hammer that you just hold against, and once it hits against that, it's going to drive it. Put it on that bolt, push it there, it'll drive this thing right out without putting any load on any of the other components. Whoops, sorry, I apologize. Pretty quickly. So again, I'm gonna do this one more time. You would put this on the nut, you can get the linkage out of your way. But again, the shaft's gonna have to come out. Remember, on the other side, it doesn't have all this in the way anyway. It's open on a stock C60. But hook this up to air, take the nut off, put a little, our breaker fluid on there if you think it helps. I don't think it really does a whole lot, to be honest. And then you just put it on there and it'll drive that pin out. Put a bag or something on this side, because when it shoots that pin, it's going to shoot it across the room. So obviously don't get in the line of fire on this side. View this side as a bullet, but put a bag or something so you don't lose the pin when it comes shooting out, but it'll drive that pin right out without hurting anything. And then you can pull this shaft off. For pulling this shaft off, this also often freezes. So the best thing I found is use a bearing separator, and it's basically a puller. But if you look at this, there's really no way to get a puller on it. On the MR2, well, the Spyder, it's not smooth either. Excuse me, it doesn't have a good flange to grab jaws on. So best thing is to get a bearing separator. And what it is, it's a two-piece plate that you can put behind this, and then you screw in to the plate. And then it presses against the end here. It'll slide this, it'll pull that right off without hurting anything. And it makes it much, much easier. It's another very useful tool. This is from Harbor Freight. Lift table, they have a hydraulic table cart, they call it. you know, Pittsburgh, typical Harbor Freight. They're not great, but for the money, it's pretty good. Don't mind this. This was verifying that the lawnmower blade did not quite clear when starting a mower on the table, but no harm done other than cut the mat. I did use Velcro. It just hangs on the table, but you can get, this is like industrial Velcro, and it's nice. There's water on here because I wash things on it, and that will hold the mat down so it's not sliding around. And of course you can just replace the mat with carpet or something. But these carts are very useful for transmissions, etc. Put things at working height, lawnmowers, etc. They drop down. One thing, just like any hydraulic jack, you don't want to rely on just the jack. So just make yourself a couple, I call them safeties, but stops, and just pieces of wood on the bottom. So once you raise the table up, cut them just a little short and then drop it down just like you would on a hydraulic stand, or think of like a hoist where you're not relying on the hydraulics, because otherwise this thing can bleed down overnight, of course, or hang up on something and bleed down while you're working on it. It's just not a good practice to be working on. We're just counting on the hydraulics. So you just jam these in here, and then I have them where they're short enough you can store them under the table when it's dropped, so that you don't lose them for the next time. Of course, it's just a couple pieces of scrap wood, but that makes a big difference. And then you just raise the jack up to where these can slide in or out, and then drop it back down and it hits the stops. And that way it's totally secure. But these things are a game changer for working on transmissions, lawnmowers, anything where you wanted a table height, but it's too heavy to lift up there. You can just get somebody to help out. You only have to lift it a couple inches, and then you can roll it around and do whatever work you need to do. And probably not recommended, but again, I pressure wash parts, everything else on it, and then just wipe down the hydraulic cylinder when you're done. Probably an obvious tip, but something like a transmission where you've got openings before you do pressure washing or anything, just plug all the holes. Plastic bags are, I'd say, a dime a dozen, but actually most people just throw them away. But these are just the shopping bags, and you can just pull them down, cut them down. They're good for sorting parts, etc. Your wife or significant other or partner probably throws them away anyway. So keep hundreds of them in your garage, and then they're always available. They're cheap, but you can stick them anywhere you've got an opening, or you need to protect a metal surface from getting water into a transmission or opening, etc. Understand they're not totally waterproof. Don't count on it for shipping. It's not a seal, but in terms of just preventing water from entering, it works fine in there. They're cheap. Again, I've seen many videos on converting a C60 from front-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive. So this is a C60 that's already been converted for the MR2 Spyder. It's got the MR2 linkage on it, etc. Again, you can get this shaft from Mitch's Auto Parts or MWR. That's your choice. I find Mitch's Auto Parts provides good service and is usually cheaper. So that's my go-to, but that's your decision. Okay, this is a C60. Don't mind the surface corrosion. This one's obviously came from the north, but it's just powder. It doesn't really hurt anything. This is out of a Celica GTS. Sometimes these aren't drilled and you have to drill and tap it. This is off the Spyder. I just want to show it because usually you see videos of this, but they don't show one right next to each other. So this has the, again, the MR2 linkage, and then the shaft. You use the existing shifting mechanism from inside the C60, but you need this new shaft and end plate with the reverse lockout, which I mentioned before. But anyway, if this isn't drilled or tapped, relocate this from your MR2 Spyder onto the new transmission, mark it, and then you can drill and tap these so that they're ready to accept the new shifter linkage. So I find to do it just the way I'm showing here. Put one right next to the other, and then you can start moving like your bolts, where your mounts would go, and you can start matching everything up so you don't get things mixed up. And trust me, it's easy to do. I've seen these things mounted upside down. There's all sorts of ways to muck this up. So the easiest way, again, is to just take it off one and put it right on the other as you go. So again, this is the C60. This bushing's gonna have to come out. You can see the corrosion on it. That's gonna be relocated back into the, for the new shifter out of the MR2. But again, this bushing will be pulled out, and then you put in the cap here, which comes from your kit that goes in the other one. I gotta take the case apart anyway, so I just may use the case, but anyway, that's one of the things you have to do.